Okay, you're
Hey.
live. It's counting down. It'll be ready now.
Welcome. I'm calling the order to order the, I guess this is a special meeting of the Wenatchee School Board to get an update on our Smart Restart plan for bringing students back to school. So welcome everybody, and I'll turn it right over to Paul.
Good afternoon, everybody. Some quick highlights. The most important highlight is things are going well. Things are going really well with the return of our secondary students, recognizing we got a small sample size. The vast majority of our secondary students were all in last Wednesday, but the last few days have gone exceptionally well. So we're real pleased with that. It's just been based off of our reopening committee meeting from teachers and principals. If you had saw that video that Mike put out earlier this morning, really impressed with the positivity of our staff and our school leaders. So really pleased with where we're at, and K-5 continues just to hum along and doing really well there too. One of the pieces of feedback that we all thought was interesting, and we all noticed it too when we were at our school sites, was how quiet our students were initially. They were kind of like pretty shocked to be back and with other people and starting to re-engage with the conversations. So teachers, and I appreciated this, and I appreciated all the work that Mike and Corey and every other leader has been putting into our SEL work and how important that was. So it was nice also to hear our teachers emphasize the importance of the SEL work that we're really doing in every class period, every day, making that a high priority to be connecting, making community within our classrooms, within our schools. So pleased that our teachers are seeing that and that it's working. So all well on that side of things. Quite honestly, the conversation is vaccines. And that's where it is. That's kind of what consumes all of us in the conversation points. As last week, we got notification on Wednesday, we had slots for 200 people to, in the two categories, 65 plus, and then the 50 and multi-generational. So we had a number of staff members, Eastmont and a little bit of Chelan County signed up. Kelly and some of our classified staff members all volunteered to make that happen, along with Safeway Albertsons personnel who were actually giving the shots. But our team really worked hard to facilitate it. Kelly said by the afternoon, things were just like going smoothly because they had kind of worked through all the kinks and doing all the work together, but really pleased with that effort.
I have a question about that.
Go for it.
Already. So we had 200 spots, and I understood that those were associated with our district to begin with, and then we released some spots because we didn't have 200 folks sign up. So I'm curious about, do we not have 200 people that are eligible? Was it a timing issue? What's up?
We don't release. So that's a misnomer. We have no control over the survey and who the survey goes out to. They send it to us, we send it out, and then somebody on the back end from Bellevue is looking at it and feeling like, okay, there's enough times gone by, we need to send it out to some other people. So we don't have access like that. Kelly can't see. They're very tight with the data, how many people have signed up. Do we need to put another push out there? But quite honestly, the criteria of 65 and older and 50 plus multi-generational is not who most of our educators are. So that's good on people for being, just really honest about where they're at and what they're doing. So that's what it is. But we have limited controls over it. Kelly literally will get the link. Our job is to fire it out to our staff with the tiering.
But we know our demographics, correct? I mean, so we know approximately how many people, just based on demographic, not health information, but demographic information, who would qualify.
Yeah, but people still need to literally, they have to be paying attention. to doing this work.
Okay.
There's no other way of communicating this out other than email.
So I just received a text from a citizen who says that the school district sent the wrong link to the school board meeting today, and they're waiting to make a public comment. They're in the wrong waiting room.
I don't know.
Okay, I can look into that if you'd like me to.
Yes,
Do you
please.
have any public comment today?
I didn't have it on the agenda, did I, or did I?
I haven't seen an agenda. for
I
today.
didn't see the agenda, so I'm not sure.
Let me look.
Usually at special board meetings, we haven't had public comment. actually.
Yeah, true.
So it's kind of a moot point if they can't get in and we're not having.
Yeah, it is on the agenda. I think that Paul had asked that it be on a couple, so we've been keeping it on there just in case. So it is on
Okay.
there. So I'll go check the link
Try
and
to
make
find
sure,
her.
see if I can get that working.
Find our
Okay.
person who's out there, and so that's really what it is. It's it's working with whatever providers reach out to us and give us access to it, and we try to get it out as quickly as possible, and then Bellevue or whomever is reviewing it and then pushing it out to other school districts.
Can I interrupt real quickly? Just
Mhm.
I just wanted to tell Laura that we turned the link off at 4:15, and that's clearly stated that they have to make their public comment by 4:15. What time did you get the text?
Well, she's been in the waiting room waiting for it. So I got the text after the meeting started. So she thought she was in the waiting room waiting to be accepted.
No, because I turned the form off at 4:20 because nobody had responded. But if you want me to let them in, I can.
I
If I
just
can,
went to the link that's for the public to view the YouTube, and it's on. We're on.
yeah. The YouTube
Yeah.
is on for sure. It's just the comment form gets turned off
Okay,
15
so
minutes
the
prior.
meeting ID is 973.
Nope. So that's for, okay, you just want to allow her to join then, because I haven't received a form and the form was shut off at 4:20. So I guess
Well,
that's
is
what
that
we're
the correct meeting ID that starts with 973? It says it's a recurring meeting. Then the last four digits are 2524. I just want to make sure
that
that,
is not the right meeting ID.
okay, well, this person is saying that that's the one that was posted.
I guess the question is whether she got her form filled out ahead of time with the protocol that Kim's talking about, right?
I don't know how that works, if they do that in the meeting after they've signed in, or I don't know how that works. I've never
They
done that.
submit the form and then they get a link to the waiting room, and then we admit them if their name matches the form.
So Kim, you're saying that should have happened prior to.
Prior to 4:15, by 4:15, yeah. Mhm. And I had not received any by 4:15, but I will double check that link and just make sure.
Okay, well, I don't know. I'm sort of inclined to let people in. She's saying they all signed the form early this morning.
Okay, I'll check it out and put a message in the chat for you, Laura.
Okay. I mean, if there are people that think they followed the procedure, I guess I'm inclined to say let them in if there's a way to do that.
Okay,
They think they followed the procedure, maybe there's a glitch. I don't know what
Okay.
the problem is, but I don't want to argue about it
okay.
online.
So I'm going to just keep going until we have some guests. Again, we continue to collaborate with our health officials, regional superintendents, and trying to get as many vaccines out there as possible to staff, but it's going to be slow. I mean, on the state call with the state superintendent, it doesn't really expect for the vast majority of educators for about another 5 weeks before because it's a large grouping in that 65 plus within the state that they need to work through. So he's thinking before we get significant numbers of teachers or educators vaccinated, staff vaccinated, it's probably about 5 weeks down the road before that really starts in earnest. So that's just good for everybody to know because everybody's super excited to get it. Transportation. Well, from today going forward will continue be the razor's edge because of the sheer number of drivers, the sheer number of buses, and the sheer number of routes, and trying to get everybody to and from and how tight it is. But that's just going to be a daily basis that Mark and Jenny and Jen keep working through to make sure that we're able to do everything we need to do. So huge appreciation for the transportation team, our drivers, and making this happen. Jenny's trying to get a few more people. They're in the queue of being trained, but they have, you have to log significant hours, and Jenny has to be there to certify that. So it's a lot of time, and she has a full-time job of making sure that our routes are going, and she's having to pick up sub positions too. She's actually driving. Her, Jen, and some of the mechanics are driving. So it's just a real loggerhead right now of trying to get our new drivers trained and then in there. But the only way to get Jen out of there is get more more people driving buses. Our nutritional service, I talked about last time, our transition continues to be really good. The grab and go meal services, 12 to 12:30. But as I was speaking at a couple different schools with their nutritional service team, that seems to be still really effective, and still making and delivering a lot of lunches. So that's been good. So just from a standpoint of where we're at, we've been doing well. If things are moving forward, things look good, things feel good at the building and site level. I think, that next big piece, a few people have asked, when are we going to go back full time? Quite honestly, that is until they reduce the 6 feet mitigation strategy and all the mitigating strategies. That's not going to be something that we're going to be working on, because we can't do that across our district where we'd have room in any of our classrooms consistently. And there's no way we're having just some classrooms back. So that is not something that we'll be looking at for some time. I'm hopeful that next fall we're highly vaccinated, and the state and health officials are feeling really good about maybe reducing that 6 feet. But why everybody is now recommending schools to reopen is because they're following the strategies, the 6 feet, the masking, the hygiene, the contact tracing. They know when we do those things, we're doing them really well. And I just want to praise all of our staff and our students and our parents, because things have been going well. And adding a variable of reducing the 6 feet, because that's the only thing you could do to do full day, is reduce the 6 feet piece. And that would, I think, add a level of complexity and, quite honest, heighten the risk factor that I just don't think that's where we need to be right now. And we're not even a week into K-12 students all being under our roof. But it's always something we're thinking about where we're at, but safety and health will continue to be paramount to where we're at. And it's worked. Again, our slow, methodical process has worked, from the number of infections, the number of positivities, the number of close contacts, all those pieces. What we're doing is working, and I'm pleased with it. And I know it's not where everybody wants us to be, but I think we're in a very good place.
Paul, can I
Please.
ask questions?
Yeah,
so
please.
I'm assuming we've looked at, in terms of trying to get everybody back on some type of all-day schedule, we've looked at maybe interlocal partnerships, like Town Toyota Center, we can't use their space or anything like that. The other issue I know people are throwing around is, why are we taking electives? Can we use those times or blocks or rooms or things in lieu of electives, getting everybody in for, and I don't know how it would work with having to double up classes and whatnot, but things like that to just be able to get everybody going all day.
Yeah, so early on, we did a lot of work with Wenatchee Valley Community College. We reached out to Toyota Town Center. We did a lot of things early on when we were thinking that most will go back to normal. I mean, way back in April and May, when the assumption was that we were going to be back in some form or fashion, but the 6 feet was still there. We did a lot of reach out. There's still significant cost to rent those facilities. No one's handing out their facilities for free. And we still had to make sure that we could teach in those large environments as well. The college was able to find a few places for us, but ultimately it really was not going to be a good solution for us. As far as a full day without elective and specials, the kids have to go somewhere. Our core teachers can't teach all day long. They can't teach for 6-7 hours straight. So contractually, there's no way to do that. And that's not throwing our union under the bus. That is, our specials and elective teachers are really important. To have a full day without them in there, it just wouldn't fly. It just wouldn't fly. And I know people want to come back full time, but I think where we've been and what we've been doing is working well from a safety and an academic standpoint. But yeah, that's how I'd respond to that, Julie.
Paul,
As far as electives are concerned, sorry, you've still got the same number of rooms. You might have a handful of extra ones. That's going to be your physical constraint.
Correct. And you know, you think of Sunny Slope. So we have a gym, one larger gym space. So you put in 2 classrooms of roughly, you know, even at the 4th, 5th grade level, you have 24, 25 kids in there. So now all of a sudden you have 50 kids 6 feet apart, both teaching at the same time, because you got to mitigate some noise somehow, because kids it sounds good maybe in theory. In practice, it's going to be really challenging to pull any of that stuff off. And then, so that's 2 classes. And again, Sunny Slopes has our fewest number of sections. They're literally nowhere else to go for our classes.
So this topic of getting students back to school physically was actually at the Ledge Rep, weekly update on last Thursday. And, there's a lot of schools that haven't sent any of their kids back. So they're kind of, going through this territory that we've already gone through. And so, and granted, it's mainly schools on the east side of the Cascades that have done that. But, I think parents are under this assumption, like we're behind everybody else, but in actuality, we are ahead of many schools just because we've done it kind of carefully and slowly, just to make sure that we've got all those mitigating strategies down. So, just as a reminder for people in the community, we're actually ahead of many schools. I think Seattle Public Schools has done some hybrid, but many schools on the west side of the state are still in an online only kind of situation. So they're going to be going down that road that we've been going down since last fall. So, I know it's probably not the answer that people want to hear, but I'm really proud of our district for doing it carefully and slowly. So thanks.
Well, has the district started working on a plan for that, for when that may happen, or are we kind of just waiting on what the, rules are?
The 6 feet is the number one piece. We could pull back in if the health officials felt like the 6 feet was no longer an issue, because we've cleared our rooms. If you've been in our school, any of our elementaries, you'll still see on the backside. I'm thinking about Orchard right over here. We rented those large storage trailers, but we've cleared our classrooms. And that was work that started last year, where we thought we were going to be back. So we wanted to make sure that was all ready to go. So it still comes down to many of our classrooms are, kind of in that 800 to 900 square feet. And then you start putting kids shoulder to shoulder, a teacher, and you're out of room. You don't get 24, 25 kids. Because I think some people are seeing, the Mead and the Moses Lake elementaries have been back. And they've just chosen not to follow the 6 foot parameters as tightly as maybe others have.
So I saw that there was a parent meeting that took place today. And I think we often forget that we are complying with the health district's recommendation in the 6 feet. I totally forgot about it. So could we put something else, just kind of like a safety first campaign sort of deal? Like we get so involved in our daily life that we do forget what those are. If you're not in tune with the news or reading the paper, well, Mead is doing it. Why isn't Wenatchee doing it? Safety first.
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea because I think you forget. Because we've come back, and, for our K2 students, they've been back since November, I want to say 2nd. Don't quote me on that date, but it feels about right. So I think it's a great idea, Maria, just to remind people that those mitigating strategies and the ones that national experts are recommending, you follow these, you're going to be safe, vaccine or not. And I heard that from Chris Reichdahl today. Somewhat, I think, encouraging the West Side, to Michelle's point, that if you follow those strategies, it's been proven on the east side of the state that things are working.
No, I can't remember. Is there any, not that we're ever going to get into phase 2, but was there any additional flexibility, or is it still going to be the 6 feet that kills us even in phase 2?
Yeah, the phase 2, I think the biggest piece that it will help is athletics, is to allow the athletics to start. But it has nothing on the other mitigating strategies that it would remove.
Okay, and that's been my understanding. And normally I just try and tell people, if you want to lobby somebody, lobby the health districts and the governor. We're just doing what they tell us to do.
It looks like we have a member of the public in for public comment.
I will change my name really quick.
Okay, and if you could just remind everybody of your name and address. So you will have 3 minutes to comment, and I'm not sure if anybody is prepared with the.
And if I could just, before I comment, just tell people because everybody got the wrong link, and Laura was able to tell me where to go. You need to go back to the public comment form and resubmit it, and you will get a new link, because the one that we were given earlier today was not working. So just wanted to put that out there in case people are having the same problem that I am.
Okay, thank you. And Kim, do you have the timer?
I do.
Thank you so much. So Chelsea,
Okay,
if you
let's
wouldn't
see.
mind keeping an eye on that, that would be great.
Okay, let me go to gallery view here so that I can see that. Okay, my name is Chelsea Mahuika, and I live on 3524 Diana Way in Wenatchee. I would like to express gratitude for the steps the board and the district have taken to get our students back in school safely and effectively. My children have amazing teachers and staff at their schools, and it's been a very positive experience for our family. Although I am extremely grateful for the time that they are in school, I know that more needs to be done. The learning loss that our children have experienced from being out of school for over 10 months is still yet to be determined. The learning loss from only attending school for 2.5 hours a day is also yet to be determined. I-ready testing is taking place across the district right now. I know we will have a better idea of where our students are at and what still needs to be done. Our children are attending school for a small fraction of the time that they normally would be in school. There are 38 school districts in our state offering full-time instruction for all students, and I know dozens more offering full-time instruction for elementary and hybrid for secondary. I have full faith in the abilities of the board to make a plan and stick with it, as you have done when bringing our students back for hybrid instruction. I asked the district this week on their Facebook page if they had a plan for when they would bring students back in person. This is what they said. The district is continuing to evaluate hybrid instruction for all grade levels now that they have returned to the classroom. At this time, we do not have a definitive timeline for the return of students to classrooms full time. And then they go on to talk about how they're focusing on the vaccine. We know as of last week, the state has made vaccinating educators a priority with the Get Ready program. Governor Inslee said this week on CNN that he knows schools can be safely open without the vaccine, which we have seen in our own district with extremely low numbers. The no plan approach by the district is concerning to me and many others. We should not be the ones to wait and see. The children in this district deserve to be in school full time. I know that we can all come up with reasons why it's not easy, it's hard, but there are districts that are doing it. Meade School District is much larger than our school district with a very similar population, and they have made it happen. I encourage all of you to be forward thinkers. How can we make this happen? How can it be done? I know that the district has a committee with no parents or community members on it for reopening, and the minutes were released today, and there was no plan, no talk of what we are going to do to get our students back in place. I don't want to be the ones that are going to wait and see what others are doing, because we can already see how it's worked in 38 districts across our state. I have cousins that are in really low income areas, and their children are in school full time. So I want to take an innovative, proactive approach and not a sit and see. As you're advocating with the community to pass a levy, I strongly encourage you to come up with a plan so that your stakeholders can feel invested in your future and feel confident that you are a board who is proactive and forward thinking. If you don't make a plan for full-time in-person schooling, I have no doubt that you will either lose students to other forms of education in schools or lose students to failure. Please plan for success for all students in our district. They are counting on you.
Thank you. Okay, and then just as a reminder, this is not a time when the board replies to comments, that we are here to listen to what you have to say. And it appears that we have another citizen, Mr. Van Bogart, here to share.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Matt Van Bogart. I live at 854 Autumn Crest Drive, and I have 2 children in Wenatchee schools. I want to thank you for helping get the kids back into school, albeit part-time. Like Chelsea, I really want to know if there's a plan coming to bring our students back to school full-time. So is there a plan? What is it? Can you share the details? When will it happen? How will it be implemented? What are the leading indicators to measure success for actually giving us a green light to go back to school full-time in person? You know, these are all questions that I get asked every day in my job, and I'm expected to deliver answers to my stakeholders. My expectation as a parent and as a taxpayer is that the school board is doing absolutely everything it can to hold the Wenatchee School District accountable to provide the proper education we all invest in. High quality in-person education is needed now more than ever. This has been outlined now for weeks by the president, the CDC, the WHO, the Washington State OSPI, and countless other health and social experts far more qualified to provide this type of input than I am. However, how can other larger school districts, as Chelsea had mentioned, be back in session full time, and we don't even have a plan? To me, this is completely not acceptable. What I am qualified, however, to talk about is witnessing the fundamental lack of learning and mental impact remote and part-time in-person learning is having on our children. It's chaotic at best. At best, our kids are receiving anywhere between 25 and 40% of the education they received during the same period last year. My kids thrive in being in school. Part-time in person is a step, but it's a step. We need to have a plan, and we need to have some direction, and we need to feel confident that we're looking at what the long-term outcomes could be here. The metrics currently posted on the Washington or the Wenatchee School District website that were updated as of today, there were just 6 students and 4 staff that tested positive over the last 14 days. This is even after the holidays and almost a week in school. The numbers are roughly 45% lower than the rates of the community as a whole. Let's recognize and congratulate our recent success and keep marching the ball down the field. My expectation is that the kids are back in school full-time in person no later than spring break. I will ask the school board as well as the Wenatchee School District to reach into the community. There are hundreds of parents that want to problem solve, that want to help come up with solutions to this challenge. And I ask you to reach into the community and ask for support. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so we have one more commenter, Rachel Petro. And Rachel, you have 3 minutes. If you would state your name and your address and keep an eye on the timer, that would be greatly appreciated. Whenever Kim's ready with the clock, we are good to go.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Petro. I'm at 59 Avalon Terrace, and thanks for getting us on here. We all signed up earlier, so thanks for making that happen. Technology is a great thing. The legislature's learning the same thing. Thank you for getting our kids back into school part-time. There's a palpable difference that I'm seeing in my 6th grader. On the flip side of that, she's also told me she's willing to do some things that quite shock me just to get back to school more full-time. Also on the flip side is that the hybrid still presents a big challenge. And I know we're still in the first couple of days and weeks, so we'll see how it plays out. But there seems to be a lot of extra time. And I've had some correspondence and conversations with teachers, and they're doing, I know a lot of them, they're all working their butts off. Like we're all working our butts off. We're all tired, exhausted, right? We're tired of this, but the hybrid does present some challenges. It's an improvement. It's a step in the right direction. And I'm glad to hear you at least starting to talk about reopening our schools full time. I think that is a discussion we've got to have. If we don't do it, let's just lead. Let's not follow. Okay. I think you guys, let's set some goals. I've got to make decisions on what my kids are going to do for school next year. I can't wait until spring break or after school gets out this, in June to make those decisions. I can't do this again. Love our district. We moved here intentionally. We've got great teachers. We've got a great team. So I would really love to see you guys lead and put some goals out there. There are tons of us in the community willing to lean in and help and problem solve. That's what we do, most of us, for a living, is we problem solve. So we know that we can do this. So anyway, just a thank you. Want to encourage you to keep going, set our goals high. Our kids deserve it. There's lots of kids that won't have the benefit of their parents being able to just put them in a different school next year to get the learning and the teaching and the support that they need. So that's really it. So thank you guys very much. And we'll look forward to hearing how you guys, what kind of goals you're going to set to get our kids back as soon as possible full-time, because boy, it makes all the difference having them in school. I see it in my kiddos. So thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate those comments. Okay, so I'm assuming that we don't have anyone else in the waiting room. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for accommodating that, Kim, and getting that public comment section activated. Apparently there was an error with the link earlier and you were able to resolve it on the fly. So good work there. Okay, so Paul, we were in the midst of hearing you speak when we came back with public comment. So I'll have you pick up where you left off, or
Here's the reality. It's 6 feet. So we can, I mean, the problem solving around it is we all move all of our elementaries to a large area that we rent or go outside, and we have 6 feet. Unless the board is going to take action to remove the 6 feet of mitigation strategies, we want to bring our students back. We know our students are best there. So the plan is once the 6 feet is removed, we bring our students back. We know how to do that really well. That is not a detailed plan. That is students coming back in. But every time we bring students in, and I want to remind everybody how concerned the doctors were when we were going to put students in a lunchrooms together. The AB, I was literally, Dr. Weed graciously sent an email back. He's back on the west side, just checking in on me and how we're doing. And one of the things that I wrote to him was, I really appreciated our hard conversations with he and Dr. Butler and Dr. Hauk when they were highly concerned about bringing that many students together in a lunchroom setting, and doing those things, and how they really pushed us on that AM PM and really helped us think that thing through. And I recognize there are other districts out there. Those boards went against health recommendations and chose to say they're not going to follow those 6 feet recommendations, because that's how they're doing it. They're in their classrooms. They're not in gyms. They're not in spaces like the Toyota Town Center. They're in their schools teaching 20, from 18 to 25, 28 students in a classrooms. I don't know their classroom sizes out there in those 36 districts, but I would assume that they're going to be very similar to ours, where they're all over the place. You're going to have some that are 700, you're going to have some that are 1,200 square feet. So I would assume that our facilities would be very similar. But I know, at least in Meade, and I know in Moses Lake, the board made the decision to say, I recognize those are the mitigating strategies, but we're not going to follow all of those. In 6 feet being the number one, that's the reality.
Oh.
They're doing everything else. They're following the masking and those pieces, but the 6 feet's the biggest issue, because they're not doing education in large spaces or in unique spaces. They're just not.
So Paul, do you know what kind of pushback they're either getting from unions or from health officials, from the state, from anything? Because at what point, it almost sounds like we're at some point able to say, this has gone on too long. We're going to be in phase purgatory forever. Like I said, people need to plan for next year. If we've got good vaccinations out there and our infection rates are low because we're doing things relatively right. I mean, the idea of masking up was to avoid 6 feet. Then it suddenly became it's 6 feet and a mask. I mean, are they seeing, and I realize this is not, people are going to have to choose at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But if that were to be the consensus this board wanted to take, are they seeing any pushback that you're aware of, or consequences?
I think early on, I think it was pretty rough, to be honest. I think there was a lot of trust that was hurt along the way. Unless you're inside a school district, you really never know the real pieces of it. But to their credit, it's been successful. I'm not saying it hasn't been, but I'm just putting the reality out there. What that board did was say, we're going to go against the health recommendations, and we're going to remove that barrier for the superintendent. And then it just becomes bringing students back in and following the masking.
Did their unions, how did their unions respond?
I'd have to go back and I can reach out to Josh, who I know better than the other superintendent in Meade. But I think early on it was not well received. I think that would be an accurate statement. And for where we're at, I think one of the things that I'm really proud of is the partnership we've had with our educators and our classified staff members, and being able to bring them along and doing this work together in a collaborative environment and doing it slowly has proven itself to be effective for us. Again, I get that some parents, and I am not saying all parents, but some parents do want their students back full time. But
We hear both sides.
we
you
do.
know, We do.
Thank you, Laura.
And not in a public meeting, but in our emails and conversations out in the community, we have people who feel strong, equally strong in the other direction. Like some folks are saying, what in the world do we think we're doing sending any child back to school right now? So in the interest of fairness, that we need to recognize that there's a spectrum of opinions out there. But, one thing I said to you earlier, Paul, was this format of meeting. When we met in person, we used to have our union leader in the room, and we have a different union leader now, and so maybe it's a work style thing, or maybe it's the format. But we had that person at our meeting every single time, and very often she made comments. We also had other opportunities where we were meeting regularly with the district staff, with a board member or two, and the union leadership and the executive committee, had been meeting monthly to discuss various topics. And we're not doing that now. And, I'm wondering if it's not time to sort of reconstitute that, because we aren't hearing the direct feedback. You are, I assume that you're in direct. I've heard you have conversations with Monica, but as a board, we aren't having those direct conversations like we have in the past. And I think it's a good idea, so we can get their perspective. And I'm sure they've got a variety of opinions amongst their staff as well. So that's my thought about it. And I just wanted to say that I did a quick little math equation here. If 38 districts are doing full-time instruction out of 294 districts, that's just under 13%. So it's not as if a majority of districts are back to full-time. A majority are not, and some of those are. So just want to put context to that.
And just for the record, I appreciate the approach we're taking. I advocate a safe approach to it, but this is my only forum really. We'll get both sides via email, but people do ask good questions that I don't necessarily know the answers to. You're right. How is Moses Lake doing it? How is the other school doing it? Okay, what kind of pushback, if that were the case? I'm just trying to get the questions answered. I'm not saying I'm ready to throw caution to the wind, because I think if we were ever to exercise that type of approach where we're going to disregard some health guidance, we need to have the alternatives. We also need to explore how we're getting the alternatives in place for the people who really are concerned and can't send their kids back right away. Are we going to stream classes and things like that, so that we do have something? This is my forum to kind of hear what the plans are and who's on these teams and why is this working somewhere and not other. So this is not to suggest that I'm saying, hey, throw caution to the wind and let's bring them all back.
Definitely did not hear that. And I appreciate the hard questions. I think it's a good place to have those. But the reality is 6 feet is that barrier to making these things happen across the district, a large district with 7 elementary schools. Because for most people, I think it's been the elementary schools that have been of the 12, 13% that Laura talked about. It is basically the elementaries who are back on a full-time basis. And I would venture to guess outside of the Moses and Meade, most of those are smaller school districts. We do have, like Meade and Moses Lake, you have 600 student elementaries from, Washington and Mission View. You have large elementaries, and some of ours are not as, a new facility like Washington is. So you have those different pieces. But it really does come down to 6 feet.
Would have been nice if that bond passed a bunch of years ago, huh?
I'd like to recognize some of the complexities of what we've been talking about, actually. And I'll kind of begin this morning on Spanish radio. There was a very good explanation by a teacher and a principal, and they were asked about vaccine as being a panacea. And the basic message was you take the vaccine for not just for yourself, but for everybody. It's a responsibility to make the system work. And I think if you keep track of the world and the disease, vaccine isn't a solution. Everything else is still working in the background. And so, that it's not a simple issue. When we look at the constraints that we face right now, it's very easy for one part of the universe to break the rules. And as long as everybody else doesn't break the rules, they're fine. And that's another thing to remember. And that gets back to the social responsibility that was very well explained on the Spanish radio this morning, to the district's credit. The next thing I'd like to go to is, I was kind of surprised. I got a bit of a question that the Internet Academy is up to 600 students now. And they gave an excellent presentation at the PAC meeting last week that I was very impressed by. But I have a question. How much of the increase from 300 to 600 has happened this year, 2021, as students have come back, or was it gradual?
It's been gradual. Probably our biggest jump was that early November, when we said we're coming back. Then we saw this pretty big jump from mid 300s to the mid 5s. And then that last piece when we came back in January, where we did another set of communication, that kind of pushes to that 600. But yeah, you can track it back to the November when we said we're going to start bringing students back, and please plan accordingly. Yeah.
And I guess where I'm going with the complexities is 600 is, say, 8% of the student population. You've got some empty rooms. There might be corners. And then a lot of what we've done with the afternoon morning plan is to get meals out of the schools. So that's another whole safety concern between what we're doing and the alternatives. So it's what's happening outside the schools that we can't predict. It's how we behave and have an impact. And the sting in the tail, I think, after saying, there's no question that not being in school is horribly harmful. So we need to be super, super alert to work the corners and not be slow when the pattern breaks and look for outcomes. Right now, I would say the priority is to do what we're doing and do it very well. But that's probably for weeks, because one of the big unknowns is, where is our whole community going in terms of what difference does vaccine make to proximity in schools and proximity in the workplace? I don't think we have an answer to that yet, which isn't to say we shouldn't think about the future. And I'm going to shut up at that point. What I want to make is, the school district is being creative. It's creating alternatives, but we can't say that we've created everything. We've got to really be alert. And that's it.
So Paul, I just had a couple of questions regarding vaccines. One came up when I was visiting the schools, and I gave what I thought was maybe the right answer, but I'm not sure. I'll check. As far as we know, vaccinations are not required for school districts.
Correct.
Correct, right? And if you could kind of let the board know, for me, it's helpful to know. I know, the vaccines are kind of slowly rolling out to our staff and to the community. So what % of our staff are vaccinated at this point? And I would love to hear updates on that, because I think that gives us a sense of our staff's level of protection as well. Thank you.
Right now, great questions. Roughly speaking, Kelly has sent out roughly 200 invitations to go get vaccinated. We don't know if every one of those were accepted, and the person ended up going. Because what they did find, even on Saturday, even when people registered, people didn't show. So we are asking staff to, let HR know that we have a confirmation. Again, it's not us running the vaccines and running the data, but we are seeking it. But I think roughly 200 people is all we're at. And we've got 1,300 employees. So it is a slow, I mean, for like 2 weeks, we saw nothing. We had no, where in early, we were really impressed with, 10, 20, 30. We were starting to see it in a week. And then for the past 2 weeks up until last Wednesday, we were having no vaccination opportunities at all.
Well, I think just knowing that 200 out of 1,300 employees have been invited to get the vaccine, I think that's helpful information. So if you could just
I will
keep us apprised of that, because that way we have a sense of how our staff are feeling protected, whether they get it or not. It's obviously up to them, but I would appreciate that information. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll make sure
Add
that
it to the COVID dashboard.
Are educators considered to be essential workers now or not? I'm sort of confused about that.
Yeah, in their newest piece, they moved educators into this larger category. But what they did was remove kind of like the tiering of the category, and they kind of scrunched it all together. So they're all kind of combined in there. So they are essential. The teachers are. I think some of the pushback was all staff are essential to open schools. So I think the most realistic piece is what Chris Reichdahl said today. Probably within 5 weeks, we're going to start seeing a significant difference in the number of staff who are going to be vaccinated throughout the state. And I think that's a fair assessment of where we're at, and where, quite honestly, it's all about vaccine production. That's where this whole thing lies.
So Paul, do you have, sensing that we're going to get maybe some freedom or feel more comfortable when vaccines come out, do you have sort of contingency plans you're working on? Hey, we're still in phase 2, but we know the significant majority of our staff are vaccinated. This is our threshold where we might bring to the board a proposal that we open disregarding a 6 feet requirement, or that we do something else. And then in that, I think that's kind of maybe what the community wants is do we have, because I know we can't predict to a day, because every time we do that, it flies in our face, but knowing that there are, there's a chart that you're monitoring where it's like, because we're not necessarily representative of the community right now in our rates and things. So there's some fairness to that when we say, okay, our staff are largely vaccinated, our infections are relatively low. Yeah, we're still in phase 1, but are we reaching a point where it makes sense to relax? And now, and I understand Martin's point as well, where we do have to be socially responsible, because we don't want to be the ones that, hey, as long as if we ignore it, but everyone else follows it, then we're good. But at some point, everyone's going to start, we're going to lose to the folks who are looking for new alternatives, because we're not being, risk averse, or we're being too risk averse, and we're not, and I hate saying that because we're dealing with health and safety. But we're also a school district where our mission and our funding and everything depends on educating our students. And if we're not doing that to the best we can, we're in this weird environment. So I'm just wondering if we're working on those thresholds. I've kind of resolved that we're going to be stuck in this state for the rest of the year. If that's the case, are we going to ramp up then? I think what people are hoping for is maybe a more solid morning, afternoon virtual structure to supplement then education when they're not in class.
I think it's a great question. I think it's all going to depend on, because you're right. Anytime the 2 times that we started doing dates, you're right. It was like, okay, we didn't hit it. And then people were upset on both sides of it. But I think when I hear from our educators, it's about making sure we're fully vaccinated on the staff side of things. Before we're looking at that full return of students back to our schools, because you start thinking about, okay, the 50% who were vaccinated, good on you, but the 50% who weren't, good luck. I hope it works for you.
But at that point, could we compel them though? Because we can't let 1 or 2 stragglers prevent everyone from, I would think, there's got to be, it's a 95% threshold, and we've made it available to everybody, but if you have so chosen not to, I think that's a different, that's how that works. I wouldn't suggest if, hey, sorry, you didn't get one, we're opening anyway. No, but I mean, we
Yes.
can't let somebody who's given that opportunity
Right.
hold everything
Yeah,
back.
so I might have misunderstood your question, so I apologize. I thought it was, what's the threshold for staff being vaccinated, as opposed to, no, everyone's had the opportunity.
Mhm.
And Kelly and I have talked about that. As long as we've given everybody that opportunity and they've had access to it, and we've done all of our communication and our support, then I think we're in that place to say we're in a much better place to open for full instruction. And that's our hope going into next year. We really do, as we look at our planning, the 6 feet rule, the lack of vaccines for our staff, and also recognizing the student piece is probably still a year away from the vaccines on that side. So it really would be feeling comfortable that we've offered it to every staff member. Every staff member has had the access. Then we can really walk into next fall feeling very comfortable with where we're at. I think at that point, then that 6 feet piece start becoming a very different conversation. And I think it would also become a very different conversation for the medical experts as well. I really do. So thank you for clarifying that, Julie.
Yeah, the time frame is frustrating, but you're right. The offering of the opportunity is the key. We also don't know how many people have had the opportunity outside of the invitation issued from the school district. So there may be people who are vaccinated, and we also don't know what percentage of people are going to refuse to get it regardless of whether it's available. I mean, is that number 2%? Is it 10? Is it 20? I don't even have a sense of how that looks in the community, but I know that there are a number of people who aren't interested in receiving a vaccine for one reason or another. So we've offered it to 15%, so we don't know if 15% took up on it, but I think that's a good metric, how many people have been offered the opportunity. Another metric, maybe, we talk about the absence of a definitive plan, can we set up criteria by which we will make a decision to move a step further forward, like the number, the positive tests per 100,000 that's being reported in the, that's been falling steadily. Now it's at 331 as of today. If it, if it falls below 100, are we willing to take a step in some direction? Then couple that with, if these two things happen, then we're willing to go. It sounds like people are asking for those kinds of measurements so that we do have a plan, but it's not date specific, but there are criteria that determine whether or not we move forward.
That's kind of what I was thinking, something like our own phasing, safe start, reopen program, where if these 3 or 4 parameters are met, then we are looking at, I mean, everything's subject to potential change, but just to give people an idea of what they're looking at. And then, hey, that may help them get their neighbors out and get vaccinated, or it may help them realize what they can do to help. I mean, because we've all said we need to, when it's community, we're saying mask up, do whatever. Well, now we're all getting frustrated because masking up isn't doing anything for the community. But what if in our small bubble here, we can create parameters where, it may not be what the governor's using, but we feel like these are thresholds that we can safely do.
So I think we have to remember, we don't live in a vacuum though, because if our region is not advancing because we're only meeting 1 out of 4 parameters, but we're still doing okay and vaccinating folks, but a lot of the community is not, I think we have to be careful that there's not a mismatch. So even though we might feel great about how our school is doing and we get our staff vaccinated, I think we have to look, if we're still stuck in phase 1 for North Central Washington, which we know we've been there for several weeks now, I think it is pretty critical that our community understand that there are pieces that they need to be doing. Otherwise, the hard work that we're doing might give way because we're not paying attention that, it's our bubble, but we also live in a bigger bubble. So
right, and that's why I envision some of it would be based on what the community wide is. But it, in fairness, I think it was a little unfair fair to make our, our region now as large in some ways as it is, and not to say we don't all do a part, but it's just, is this, is what's going on in Grant County, reflective of what's going on here? I'm not saying it's all their fault, but if we're doing great down here, but we're going to be continually penalized for things out there, I mean, it's harder to feel like it's your community not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so that's where I say some flexibility that is based community-wise, like on our number of infections and whatnot, but that also has some realistic value to what is local in our schools, our stakeholders.
I think there are two areas that we need to be contingency planning on, and neither of them is easy. One is, I think, having some criteria. I'm not sure about metrics because I think those are external, but like we've offered vaccines to everybody. But at the same time, we should be looking at what can we do to make up for lost learning on the kids.
Thank you.
And that's no matter how we're teaching them. That also is extremely difficult. And it's one that you're going to be playing with very fluid situations. And do you have any money for summer school? Who can go to summer school? Who can't? Should you push it over to next year and change the program for 21, 22? They're going to be very light-fingered, fluid, and flexible plans, let's call them that. So I think that's what we've got to do. And these are plans that might change the week's notice. When we talk about criteria, I need both feet and both hands for the number of times the state's changed its criteria when they were using numbers.
Right. And I guess that's also one of my concerns as well, is so long as, I feel like we're probably resolved for the rest of spring to be in this sort of hybrid model. Now, is there a plan to be more vigorous than in, now that we're getting kids back to school every day, that seems to be helping with some of the social emotional stuff we were dealing with. Can we make some of this lost learning up by making the virtual learning more rigorous? Now I don't mind if my kid sits on an iPad for half the day if they're going to school the other half of the day, just to kind of get more, because it is frustrating where it's this great, we're on a real schedule now, but they don't start class till the afternoon. So we're still kind of like, oh, what's the morning look like? Oh, get to it when you can, or, so more solid commitment to a full school day, whether it's half in your house and half. And I know that creates some access issues for some, but I feel like getting the kids to school half the day at least helps resolve some of those access issues.
And just as a reminder, teachers are working the whole day because they got their different groups. So it's not like the teachers are on the same schedule students are on. They're teaching that AM, they're doing the PM, the elective specialist teachers, it's different. So they're just a lot of complexities to making this for additional time during the school day with our classroom teachers and our specialist teachers.
No, and I understand that because you'll have the same teacher, and I honestly am not looking at a schedule, so I don't know if there's a way to have kids zoom into a class that's live for a subject and then go to their other classes later in the afternoon, or even, pre-recorded stuff works fine. I just think watch the lecture, do the quiz online, or bring your quiz to school, or just something so that it is more a full day feeling like you're in a class. It doesn't necessarily need to be synchronous all the time, but if that's a model that will work, because I as optimistic as I try to be, I struggle to see that we're going to get back before the end of this school year. So can we bridge that learning gap by making it a little bit more rigorous in those down times?
Yeah, and I think some of the parents and what Martin just said about focusing on that, I think regardless of our timing, we've got to have a plan for making up that learning loss, because we know that it's going to happen, and it's going to be,
I don't even know what
any reason
grade
why it
my
wouldn't be.
kid's in.
What's that?
I don't know what grade my kid's in. I'm not sure she finished 6th grade, but we rolled into 7th. So I was just
Right. It feels like
I
there's
have
going to be
no
learning
idea.
loss across the whole spectrum. And,
Across the
and
world.
we need to
Let's
address
remember,
that.
we got a worldwide pandemic. All students are in a situation where they're not like they've lost to Billy over in Idaho or Cindy down in Georgia or wherever. It's a huge challenge. It is an absolutely huge challenge. And our educators are working, quite honestly, harder than they've ever worked before to deliver the instruction that they are delivering on a daily basis. Do we look at summer school? We are absolutely, just like last year. We can't remember the number, but it went up by a significant percentage of the number of students who attended summer school last year, because we removed just the migrant bilingual side of things and opened it up to more students who had that opportunity. Diana, if you remember the number, if you don't, no worries.
I think we were somewhere in the ballpark of 500 students, where we would typically see 2.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But I absolutely hear you, Julie. I absolutely hear, and trying to make all of these different pieces actually work is the biggest challenge.
You want to drop another rock into the lake. The superintendent of public instruction is talking about year-round schooling. In a sense, that is a different dimension, not necessarily in that form, but it's another way of looking at what we have to do or can do.
This might be the right time for that.
I would do it. You can't do anything else.
If we need to make up learning losses, and we've got 3 months, why would we continue to take those 3 months off under the current circumstances? It doesn't make sense.
There's nowhere to go.
From a mental health standpoint, I think, just as a reminder, right? Everybody's having pandemic exhaustion, right? All of us here, all of the kids in school, all the staff, all the parents, everybody's tired of it, right? And we're still in a marathon. I mean, the vaccine is just rolling out over the last month or so. We still don't have enough doses to get people vaccinated enough. So we're still in this for a while. And so it was kind of like, yay, we're excited, everybody's back. And now it's like, okay, we're pushing to get people back more time. But remember, our teachers have had to pivot and pivot and pivot since last March. And so let's try to give grace to our neighbors, our staff, our students. I know we want to make up learning, but remember, like Paul said, this is worldwide. I read something by a person who was involved in a wartime situation when she was in school, right? And that person now is like a PhD or whatever, so we can get through the pandemic. Yes, we might feel like we're losing a lot of learning, but that losing time of learning is happening across the board. And maybe our children are probably learning some other things during the pandemic that they wouldn't have learned otherwise, right? And I'm not talking about online gaming. I'm talking about, maybe more time with family or other skills that they've worked on, or hanging out with a parent and doing some activities and stuff that they wouldn't have had a chance to do before. So hopefully our students will be able to move forward, maybe not with the same academic skills that they would have in a traditional year, but maybe they've learned some other skills. So let's try to be optimistic about it. Let's keep in mind that, yes, we are a school, but not all learning happens in the classroom, right? And remember, it's a marathon still. We're still in this race. We're still trying to keep people safe. We don't want people in our community dying. We don't want people in our schools dying. I'm really proud of how our district has come back. So I'm going to leave it at that. But everybody just take care of yourself because this is hard stuff for everyone, right? And, Julie, you have 3 kids at home, and I know that you are dealing with the different buses and stuff. And, you know, having younger kids is hard right now. You know, if you have kids in daycare and they're not going to daycare, God bless you parents that are struggling with that. So it's hard for everyone. So my hat's off to everyone. Just everybody take care of yourself. This is hard work for everyone.
One of the things that I want to just kind of remind, not being a teacher myself, but just kind of thinking about it, you know, we think of the whole day. You know, we start our day at 7:45 and it ends at 2:30 for, you know, if kids were going to school normally. What I keep hearing is that, oh, less instruction time, but we also forget about the time that it takes a kiddo to, you know, get to the classroom from specialist class, the time it takes to get settled into a classroom. So really, kids are not sitting in a classroom learning for 6 continuous hours. Kids are going from one classroom to another. They're going to recess, they're going to lunch, they're coming back and taking time to settle in to. So I think, you know, just putting things in a context, being the teacher at home feels like they're not getting enough instruction because we're having to deal with all the passing time or, but I think we forget that. We don't recognize that because we're not teachers by profession. But there is what we would call non-instruction time in the daytime as well for students if they were going to school full time. Kids are going to school full time. It's just half-time home, half-time at school. So let's just not forget that. And those, I think those are teachers planning. I think we got rid of teachers planning times as well because now they're teaching longer and more. So let's just give teachers some grace and just realize that, okay, maybe our kids don't sit at a desk learning for 6 whole hours.
I will admit my daughter's kindergarten teacher is probably the most organized of all the teachers any of the students have. But inevitably, my daughter's got her ponies out in the morning and just playing around and, oh yeah, I finished. I was like, I'm sure you did. So, but they try. I know it's not perfect, but.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the board's grace. I echo Michelle. This is hard. There's no, I wish there was an easy solution. I wish I could wave a magic wand and make all of our students come back perfectly, and make sure that I can guarantee that our staff will be healthy and safe. That is something I just want to reiterate. It was something that came up today and I forgot who said it to me, but a reminder that we've not had a serious issue within our staff that I'm aware of based off of COVID. We're very fortunate. And I do believe that is because we've been slow and thoughtful. I worry about our kids, I worry about our staff, because that's my number one job is safety. And the second piece is the academic and the social emotional pieces, but their safety and my staff safety is number one. And I'm proud of where we're at. And I'm proud that we don't have a lot of positivities and exposures. And I'm proud that from what I've heard, I don't have staff members who have been significantly impacted like we've heard from others. And I think that is a real celebration of people and something sometimes we forget. And I know people want to get going fast.
Well, I think you should say, go.
Oh, I was gonna say, just on that note, if you could pass along from a parent and a board member, I'm very appreciative of the independent actions that the staff are doing to be safe in the community and whatnot, to keep themselves safe and to keep the students safe. I think, you know, there's so much we can tell them, but a lot of what we're learning about this is masks aren't 100%, things aren't 100%. So it's just being safe. And so, you know, in that regard, I do really appreciate the self-initiative that they're doing to keep everybody safe.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Julie. And, you know, our community is doing a good job. Our numbers are going down. We were at 3, again, don't quote me, but I think it was like 360 per 100,000 within Chelan and Douglas County. I mean, before winter break, we were closing in on that 1,000, or we were over 1,000, I think, at one point. So to Julie's point, I think everybody has really is trying to follow this as much as possible. And again, to Julie's point, there's no one perfect thing. I think it always goes back to that Swiss cheese analogy. As long as we have all these different pieces of Swiss cheese in place, there's a better chance of catching the little particles as they go through. And I am proud of our Swiss cheese, I guess, and where we're at.
I think this is an important word. I don't think it's accurate to say slow pace. The district has very moved at a well-measured pace, measured. And just, for Diana, I think that's an important word to get up, because it is a judged pace, a calculated pace, thinking about things. And that's important to keep that going ahead. That's how this district is going to be successful.
And how we're going to keep our staff and our community behind us as we move forward. I really do believe that. I think you've got to keep making sure your staff is alongside you during this journey. Because they're the ones who are in class all day long with, currently 12, but they're the ones who will also be in class all day long with 24 and 25 kids. No one else. Not Paul, not the parents, but that one teacher in that classroom with 25 to 28 kids. So I think that's just a reality of where these people are at, and the fears, and how we've slowly gotten to this point. And every step along the way has been a lot of anxiety and a lot of concern. And I get it, because they're the ones sitting in those classrooms. They're the ones there every day. So that's why I'm so proud of the methodical, thank you, Martin, pace that we've gone, and we've brought people along with us in a collaborative spirit, because they're the ones in the classrooms. They're the ones who welcome students every morning. Our principals are the ones who are engaging hundreds of kids every day. I think of Jeff Jager, who at Mission View, who's literally out front collecting, the fast passes, but he's in, he's talking to parents with their windows down, and he's engaging hundreds of parents every day. Yeah. And our teachers. So I'll just stop there.
Yeah, that's real.
So that's it from me.
Well, we've had quite a discussion today. So thanks everybody for participating, and thanks to those who joined us online to offer their thoughts on our reopening. So we are, there are some things that actually I didn't have us talk about, but we can save that for another day. So if we're following along on this schedule, then our next Smart Start, or whatever we're calling this meeting, would be on the 16th. And I see that we have something scheduled on the 16th at 1 o'clock, and I think that's a strategic planning workshop. Is that what that is? So are we up for holding two meetings on the same day? Guess we can think about that until our board meeting next week. And we have a meeting on the 9th, so we can discuss that. I'm just putting that out there. We have the strategic planning meeting on the 16th. That would be our normal cycle to have an update on this topic.
Is that a 2-hour workshop, Paul?
Hour and a half. We always block 2, but yeah, it's scheduled for the hour and a half.
Okay.
Would it be possible to add it to the bottom half of that meeting? Half hour?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Sounds like a good
My nightlife experiences, yes, I would much rather do that. I generally will have two evening meetings every week, so the fewer evenings, I 100% Maria's recommendation.
My only concern is I'm wondering if we can't move that workshop because the 16th is the first day back after the holiday. And that, because Monday's President's Day, correct?
Correct.
So I don't know about anybody else, but my Tuesdays that are like Mondays get a little out of control.
If we have a choice between the two, because of, people's schedules like Julie, I would rather have the strategic planning meeting because it's been a while since we've done that versus a COVID update because, we've got everybody back and we're probably not going to see a lot change in the next 2 weeks. But maybe we could tack that information onto our regular board meetings if necessary. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if we've got a meeting, do we have a board meeting that? Yeah, we've got a regular board meeting that.
We have a board meeting on the 9th and the 23rd, and we
Oh,
have
okay.
executive sessions attached to both of those. So
Okay, so
we already have a little bit of a long schedule for both of those meetings. So we could choose a different day. We could do, I mean, there's nothing magical about Tuesday. We could do Thursday.
Well, I guess I'm wondering, because we were having the special meetings, because there were a lot of updates initially with COVID, with the CARES dollars and stuff, do we feel like this is a necessary twice a month or once a month meeting at this point? Maybe once in a while? Because I would like to see our strategic goals kind of move forward, because I think as we're seeing vaccines rolling out and stuff, maybe there's less that the staff have to update us about COVID. I don't know. I'm throwing out, maybe we don't need a special board meeting twice a month.
And we can add an aspect to our regular board meetings where we're just having a moment for hybrid learning at twice a month at our board meetings.
yeah, and I thought we were doing these current COVID meetings just basically if there were updates, not necessarily because we had to and we were canceling them if we didn't have an update, which was fine. I was more, I guess, concerned about doing the strategic plan meeting. I guess I'm struggling, because it's a little bit more time, and coming off the holiday, it's a little harder to devote to.
We can move that to the following Tuesday, but I would love to get a strategic planning with Michelle. I feel like the board needs to be updated on a strategic plan, but we can move it to I'm saying that, and Kim's probably about falling out of her chair. The following Tuesday. That's a regular board.
But that would put it on a regular board.
Here's the deal on the COVID update meetings. We had been meeting and then we canceled and went to the as needed. But then we had, some students back in school and we had to pull off, and there were some decisions made without having the board together, and the timing just did not really work to scramble to get back together in time to, have a public discussion. And, I sort of feel like the public should have the opportunity to see the board at least discussing major decisions that impact most of our students before they're announced in the newspaper or whatever. I'm kind of inclined to say that we keep the meetings on the calendar and then we have nothing, we cancel, as opposed to trying to scramble to meet in the event, say we had a big spike in cases, or we had, an outbreak out of school, or something, or, I think we had a lot of discussion about vaccination rates and staff being vaccinated or not being vaccinated. That could be tagged into a regular meeting probably, but if we had anything more, we had a robust discussion. We've been on the call for an hour and a half, and nobody stopped talking since we got on. So it feels like there's stuff here. But that's my 2 cents. I'm in favor of putting them on the calendar and canceling them if, our rates fall to 25 per 100,000 and everybody's vaccinated, then we go, yay, and no meeting.
So what's the deciding factor if we meet or not? Do I just say I don't have any updates or decisions? Because that's really where it was. Lori, you're right. It was about the decisions. We had one, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. We had that one situation where we pulled back before moving forward because we had such a spike in our staff numbers. And we felt like it was important to have those meetings, but that was a big decision. And I committed that I would never, we would always bring it to the board no matter what it was, even if that we needed a special meeting.
Yeah, I would like, my understanding has been that they were kind of keeping them on the calendar and then canceling them as there wasn't much. And now that it's made sense to have them these last couple of weeks because things are kind of happening rapid fire, whether it's just updates with the vaccine, we've got kids all now back in class. It's good to get that kind of update. But yeah, going forward, if things don't change foreseeably, I'm fine leaving them on the calendar, but then canceling them if you don't have a major program change or a big decision or something's going to hit the news and that we need to vet. I mean, that's kind of where I feel like we should be.
Yeah.
As long as I have that criteria, I just want to make sure I had a criteria to work off of.
Leaving them on the calendar, we are having 3 meetings, 2 meetings and 1 workshop in the next 3 weeks. And I think Julie's right. We've gone through the fast moving period after going back to school. Is leaving them on the calendar meaning that we can add a slot to any of those meetings as needed, put it on the agenda, as opposed to having a separate meeting on a separate day? Because it would make more sense to me to have the ability to add on to the agenda than to have a whole separate meeting. It's less disruptive.
Yeah,
to me.
I think we were doing that so as not to drag out the existing meetings to 3 or 4 hours at a pop, because that gets exhausting.
Well, and I think also parents look for these meetings so they can come and be informed as to what's happening. So I don't think there is a bad thing to continue to meet, just have COVID meetings as needed. Like I said, I think as parents, we kind of tend to get antsy and want to know what the district's up there or what they're talking about. And I think for parents, it just kind of provides a little bit more information as to where the district's at, where the board's at.
I do think it is maybe comforting to them for them to see that we are meeting more frequently to go over these things. Having said that, if there's not anything substantive, it doesn't make any sense to sit here for, whatever time. But I do notice that we seem to have more public interest in these meetings than we did way back at the beginning. So, like I said, I don't mind keeping them on the calendar. I think it does make them available technically if we had other urgent things that we need to special meeting notice and put on there, but I don't want to abuse that format.
Okay, so for next Tuesday, or not next Tuesday, the 16th, do you want to add it on to the end of our existing strategic planning meeting as opposed to, or is your preference to schedule it on a different day?
Oh, pause.
Yeah, I think we got to go back to Julie's first request, like requesting that for her on this one because it ends on a holiday and Mondays are crazy. It's really going to be challenging for her to make the strategic meeting. Is that
so?
what
Were you saying you're having problems scheduling for the strategic meeting as well, regardless of what the meeting is? You're having a trouble with that day. I
am having a trouble with a long meeting on that day, and I didn't realize for some reason I was thinking there were two. There was a board meeting and the strategic meeting. So it's more that 2 hour, a 4:30 would likely be a quick meeting is not as problematic. It's having that big block committed to like 2 hours on a day where I do get very, very high client volume stuff. And so that makes me uncomfortable a little bit. So I would prefer if we could move it. It wasn't on my radar, and I apologize for that. That's
okay. Well, maybe we can put it down for the 2nd, which would be the next available Tuesday. And then between now and then, if there's, if you and your staff develop some criteria, as was sort of discussed today for making forward motion, or some other development arises that we need to discuss, for now, we can tack them on to one of the 3 meetings that we have scheduled between now and the 2nd. But we can put the 2nd down, March 2nd at 4:30, whatever's most convenient for people.
And that's for the
COVID.
COVID. Okay, so we'll keep the strategic planning as scheduled for an hour and a half.
We'll keep it as tight as possible to that hour and a half.
Okay,
That's pretty crucial.
on
Yeah.
the 16th. Okay, cool.
All right, then I think we've hit our topics.
Okay.
Thank you,
So-
Kim, for putting those on the calendar and sending the Zoom links.
You bet.
Yeah.
You
I'm
bet.
a
Yeah,
Google
I'll
Calendar user.
I'll put them all on the Google, and then I will also send the PDF. I know some of you like the paper version, so I'll do it both on the live calendar and yeah, all the places.
Thank you.
Super. Thank you so much. Good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody. Thank you.
All right.
All right.